we are going to learn how to use measurement and proportion to translate an object onto the paper. You'll see that I'm going to be using a dark pencil today because I want you to see what I'm doing. But I do expect you to work a lot lighter so that you can see those circles and lines, but they're not too apparent, not as apparent as I'm doing it. And it's really important that you have those in place, not only from when we're drawing still life, but you'll see when we're doing figurative work and we're working with portraiture and hands, that you'll want to maintain those shapes. Okay, so right now I'm looking at this this cup, and I'm going to do the elliptical shape here at the top. And you can see I'm working really light, really loosely here. And then I'm going to do a line down the center. And the reason I always do a line down the center is I want to make sure that the drawing is symmetrical. So I've got this elliptical shape here now, and then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to measure the top, but I'm doing it on here. I'm going to measure the top of the glass and I'm going to translate that onto the drawing. And you'll see that when I do this, I keep my hand and my arm in the same location. I don't go back and forth because that will change the proportion. So the idea is the proportions in this object are particular to themselves. So it doesn't matter how big or small you do your drawing, the measurements will always be the same. So I'm going to be taking the one side of my pencil, and where my thumb stops is the actual top of the object. And I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to measure how many of those are in the side. And it's 1, 2. So now I look at my drawing and I go 1, 2. And then I'm going to measure the bottom. And that's the bottom circle right here. And I'm going to see how many of those are in the top. And it's this many. So I know it's a little smaller. And I'm going to start it here at the bottom here because I know that's what I measured as the bottom. And I'm going to just do a quick shape here. But I'm going to actually just measure to make sure this is correct. So I'm going to measure from here to here. And I'm going to see how many are in the top, and it's actually half. And so I can see, okay, it's here. So this is where it goes. And this is the way you can see that it's accurate. And you'll see that it's just a little bit wider at the bottom than it is at the top. And here is your basic structure, your basic cup. So that's your basic, simple shape. Now we're going to be starting with a more complex object, and you'll see here there are 1, 2, 3, 4 elliptical shapes where we are going to be doing measurements, whereas the last one there was only 2. So I'm going to start again with a simple shape at the top, again really loose. And these are on newsprint, and these are just process drawings, so don't need to worry about using your good paper. And you can see I'm doing this incredibly loosely. I just want to get you learning about how to measure. Okay, so remember the next thing we do the line down the center because we want to make sure it's symmetrical. Okay, so now I'm going to measure from here to here. So I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to measure from this distance to this distance, and then see how many of these are in here. So I've gone to the side and there is perfect, it's half. So it's here to here. Now, one thing you may notice when you're looking at this, because you're looking at it from the camera, the angles may be a little different than what I'm looking at. So you will see that your angles are going to be, they may perceive to be different, but from where I am, this is what I'm seeing because I'm looking down. Okay, so I know that's the distance from here to here, and then I'm going to measure the width. So I'm going to take the width and I'm going to measure how many there are. And there's 3/4. Now the thing that's really cool with this is it's very mathematical. You've got the structure in half, and we measured that for here. And then here you've got it again, and you've got 3/4. So it's very easy to measure. And what's nice with my center line is I can see it's off a little bit. So I need to know to move that over just a little bit here. Okay? So there I'm going to do another elliptical shape starting at the bottom. And I'm going to assume it's pretty close to this one. Okay, and there we've got the top. And then I'm going to measure from here to here, where you can see it's starting to bow. And so I'm going to measure from there how many of those are in here. And it's interesting, it's one. So I'm going to take one here and here. So I know that's where it's the widest section. Make that line a little straighter here. And then I am going to measure the width of it. And it is 1 1/4 of these. Okay, so I'm going to add that. And I know that is the actual width here. Okay, and I'll do my shape. I know it's coming out here at this shape. And then the last thing we want to measure is the bottom circle, and that is, it's about 3/4. So we're going to put it here. And I also want to measure from here to here. So I'm going to measure how many of these are from here to here. And there are 1, 2. So there are 1 and 2. So I know that the bottom is here. I know the sides are this side, that wide. So I'm going to do my circle here. And then I'm going to measure what this depth is, because this is going to be a little deeper. And it is just a little bit, 1/3. So it's better, it's right there. And here we have our more complex shape. Now, one thing to think about as well is you can see that the angles are going to be different depending on how you're looking at it. So if I were to go like this, if I was standing right over it, it would be very round, almost a circle. And I was looking from this angle, you would see it only be almost like a slit. You may not even see the elliptical at all. So this is really important that this measurement is correct to start. Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to put together a composition of 3 objects, and what we're going to see here is how we can measure one object against another, and we can also measure negative space, and we're also going to be doing some foreshortening. So you'll see with this particular glass, if you looked at it like this, this measurement from here to here is different when it's on an angle. It's much shorter. And foreshortening is when an object is shortened because of the angle that it's on. And this is when your measurements will really work well for you. Especially when we're working with figures, you're going to be very happy that you've learned how to do this. The other thing is that I mentioned earlier in the discussion and the project is that we're working with translucent objects. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned, I want you to maintain your circles, but I also want you to be able to see through one object to the other, because as we start drawing more opaque objects, I want you to draw them like you can see through them. So, and it's a good learning tool. So we have a composition here of 3 objects. When you're doing your composition, I would like you to have at least 2 close together like this, and one where there is a space in between, and then one that is on an angle so it is foreshortened, so that you can learn all these techniques with this one particular drawing. So what I'm going to decide first, I'm looking at this, is this a horizontal or a vertical composition? I'm looking at this one right now and I'm thinking from where I'm standing, it's definitely a vertical composition. So I'm going to be working in a vertical format. Now, if this was horizontal, I would take my page and I would turn it around and I would work from a horizontal format. So it just depends on where you're standing. I mean, if this, if this particular shot glass was off on the other side, then it would be a horizontal format. But for this, for me, my particular drawing, it's vertical. So I'm going to do that first. So the other thing I like to consider when I'm starting something like this is I want to make sure everything's in the composition. Because if you start doing a lot of detailed work and then you haven't really plotted out where everything is, then you may find out that you have no more room for this object, or one object is not in the right place. So I like to eyeball it. It's not exactly right, and it's really, really loose. Like I mentioned, this is on newsprint. I just want you to learn the techniques. These are not finished drawing, these are process drawings. So we're gonna go like really, really loose here. I'm gonna just like this looks like it fits here, and then I'm gonna have my glass looks right here. You know, this is obviously gonna change, but I know at least that my shot glass is probably gonna end up in the drawing. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the largest object, which is this large vase in the back. And I'm gonna start with my elliptical. And then I'm going to do my line through the center. And then I'm going to measure from the top here to the first circle. And you'll see that there's 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to measure to this one here first. I'm going to measure how many of these go down to the bottom. So there are 1, 2, and a half. So thankfully I've got this half measured here, and I've got 1 and 2. And then I'm going to measure the width of it, like we've been doing with all the other objects. And it is just a little over a half. So I'm going to measure that here. And then again, I want to see what the depth is. So I'm going to measure it from the top to the bottom. And it's approximately a quarter. And you will see with these two tall objects that the difference from here to here will be very different. You'll see that it's much larger here at the bottom than this one because of the angle I'm looking at. It could be different depending on what angle you're looking at. So we know that it goes, I said a quarter, so there it is. And I've got my shape. And I have my vase here. Again, it's a very loose drawing. We're just going to do our measurements. Then I'm going to do the next one, which is the bottom, and that is almost the width of this. So I know it's here. Okay. And here I've got my second circle here. And there I've got my vase. Okay, so we've got the first shape in. And then I'm going to measure this glass here next to it. So that's going to be my next set of measurements. And I'm going to see where it is starting from where I am. It's actually starting from the center line. And you can set these up so it makes it look easier for you. It starts as a center line. And the top, this part here, and this side part here, start here. That matches up here. So I'm going to measure where this starts here from the top. So I'm going to use, I'm going to use this shape to measure how many down there is to that. Okay, so we have 1, 2, actually. So 1, 2, that is the top part, okay? And then I know that it goes to here, so I only have to measure the width, and the width compared to this one actually is almost the same size. So here we go. We have now the top of that one. And then I am going to measure the center of it, comes down here. And I'm going to measure the distance from here to the bottom. It is a little over a half. Okay. And then I'm going to measure the distance at the bottom. It is just under a half. And I'm going to measure the width, and it's about a quarter. It's much smaller. So I've got this shape here. Got this glass, and then I'll measure the bottom part. So I'm going to measure from here to here, which is approximately a quarter. And then the width. Okay, and that's 3/4. So, and then so I know that I've got the shapes there. It's going to be pretty close to the other one. And there you've got your glass. So you've got those glasses beside each other, measured from each other. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure the negative space from here to here. So from where I'm standing, I'm going to measure from this edge here to this edge here. And I'm going to use a technique of just using my pencil to see where these line up. And I can see the edge lines up right here. And I'm just going to do that measurement from here to here. So the measurement, I'm going to measure it against this one here. And it starts right here, okay, from where I am. And then I'm going to measure the back section, and that is just a little over half. And that starts here, okay. Now this is the interesting part. Like, you'll see that this actually looks so much bigger because it's close to me. So that's why your measurements are really important. But now this cup is on an angle. So remember how we did the lines through the center for our objects? This one actually is coming at an angle. So I want to make sure that I've got the angle right of the cup, because that actually is the center of the cup. So I'm going to measure the top part of the cup compared to, I've measured it against this one. But I could also measure it against the one in behind too. I can measure it against this one here. So that could be 1.5. So it's going to be quite big here. But I also want to measure the distance from here to here first. So the distance from here to here is half of one of these. Okay. So I've measured the distance from here to here from this one here. And then again, I'm going to measure the bottom from the top part here from the bottom. And that is 1.25. And so that will go here. And I know it's like a full circle, so. And here is my cup. And depending on the angle, I might be able to see the bottom of it, but I can't. So that is my angle of my cup. And because it's so close to me, it's much bigger. So that's how we use the measurements of one object against another to do proportion. We have foreshortening, we have negative space in here. Similar kind of composition as with the translucent still life, as you're seeing two objects in relationship to each other, and then you're seeing some negative space, and you're seeing a little bit of foreshortening. Again, the first question is this a vertical or is this a horizontal composition? So again, where I am standing, it is vertical. But if I was standing on the other side of this, like a couple of feet over, it would be a horizontal format. And you can decide which one you want to do, because you'll be in control of your own composition. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Is I'm just going to get a sense of these shapes and just sort of think of where they are. And you'll see in the last one that it was really, I was off by a bit, but at least I knew that everything was in frame. So remember the last time we started with the object in the back, and we also have our line through the center. So now we don't have perfectly symmetrical objects, but we're still going to have that line through the center because we want to have a sense of symmetry, and we also have a sense of direction. So I'm going to look at this first pair, which is this one in the back. And if you look at it, you look at this pair here, you can see that it's got like a flat section and how it's sitting. It's actually not a circle on the bottom. It does have this area that actually supports it. So whenever we're drawing anything, we need to think about how it functions. So when I'm looking at this, I want to think about how this pair sits, because that's really important, because I want to indicate it in my drawing. So I'm going to just do a line here because I know that pair is sitting flat. And then where I'm sitting, it's actually sitting pretty straight. So it's sitting, this is a pretty straight pair from my angle. But what's kind of cool is it's got this stem coming out of it, and I'll have that continue on as part of that center line. So then I'm going to measure the first section here, which is approximately halfway, and I'm going to measure the height and the width. So I'm going to measure halfway to that point where it starts to get larger, and I'm going to measure its width, and it's about 3/4. So I've already measured here, I've already made a decision. That's halfway. I mean, it's pretty obvious, you look at it. So it's 3/4 of that, which is here. And I'm going to just do that circle here. Now, it's not a glass, obviously, but I just want to give it that nice kind of three-dimensional look because I'm kind of putting together as blocks. And then we can go back in and do some more detailing with it. And then I'm going to do the section, this wider section, and I'm going to measure the width, and its width and height are the same, which is really great. And, you know, I can't actually see that side, but because we've been working with the translucent objects, I'm going to pretend that I can see it. And I'm going to put the shape in. This is like a circle, right? So you've got this really nice circle. And then I know I'm looking at this one, so I know that it's got like this base. So this base is holding it. So now we've got like this lovely shape, and we can go back in and we can just start drawing those beautiful curves, but we've got like that dimension to it. Okay, so I've got my first pair done. And then I'm going to look at the next one in front of it. And remember what we did with the objects, the glasses, is that I saw where it lined up. So it lined up about a 1/4 way in. And I want to measure too the distance from the bottom of this pair to the bottom of that pair. And I'm going to measure that distance. I'm measuring the negative space, just like we measured the negative space in the last drawing. And that's about here. And I can choose whatever I want in the drawing to make that decision. But what's interesting in this as well is that this pair, this one in the front, is actually bigger than the one in behind. So it's going to be coming out here, but it's also, I can see from where I'm standing, it actually is as tall. Now, if it was a smaller pair, or a pair of the same size, you would see it coming down here, but it's not. So we've got the similar situation here. We've got it split in half, and this one is kind of on a bit of an angle. I'm going to indicate that. And it's on a little bit of an angle there, the way it sits. And then I know it's lined up with the top of this one from where I'm sitting, and it's about halfway. So I'm going to do the same thing as in the last one. I'm going to measure the length and the width. It's about 3/4 of the length, which is here. And again, I'm going to just, you know, give it a three-dimensional kind of feel. It's going to make it look like a cylinder. And then I'm going to measure the width. And that's it's not as wide as the other one, but what's great is we can see that it measures up perfectly. And then again, then we can just start doing those beautiful lines that we can eyeball. But we've got that sense of volume, which is so important when drawing anything with volume. You want to feel that, right? So here we've got the shape. And what's kind of interesting now, you're looking at them, you think all pairs look the same. Well, they don't. They all look very different. And you'll see the difference in these two. And then I'm going to draw the one in front, again, measuring negative space from the bottom of this one to the top of this one. And it actually, from where I am, is very short. And I'm going to pick whatever I want on here. Like, you can choose a section. I've noticed that the negative space from here to here, just eyeballing it, is the same from here to here. When I measured it, I was correct. So here it is. And I'm going to measure now the size of this, which is, oh my goodness, like it's almost the size of this one here. So again, you've got something much bigger because it's in front. And so I know that this is actually here. This is the bottom of the pear. And like we did with the shot glass, I want to do the direction of the pear. So it's in this angle, okay, because it's going to be symmetrical on both sides. And on here too, we have the base, so we're also going to be indicating, you know, that as well. You've got the sense of a base because it's sitting on it. Then I'm going to measure from where it gets wider to where it gets thinner. And I'm going to measure that distance, and it goes from here to here. And I'll get the width, and the width is from here to here. Okay. So you can see that I've maintained, I want to make sure that it's symmetrical on both sides of this line, just like I have with the other drawings. But what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to create another cylinder that's on its side, just like I did with the shot glass. And I've got my stem here, and then I'm just going to allow this lovely curve. And that's when you can start like playing with these bumps and these different sections here. But you've got the structure, so when you do these, there's a reason for it. So now you've got the 3 pairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do one section of it for the value drawing, and we will go from there. So you'll see in your supply list that I've asked you for a Staedtler or a white eraser. I don't want you using it too often, but this is a time when I want you to use it, because what I don't want are hard lines where the highlight is. So we can actually use an eraser like a tool, so we can use it like a line. So for what I like to do sometimes when I'm doing these, again, these are process drawings. These are not like finished pieces you're going to be putting on your wall. This is just learning technique. Is I'll just indicate light source. My light source is coming from here, and that helps me to understand. Obviously, I'm looking at the still life and I'm seeing what's happening, but I also understand that the light is hitting the side of this pear and is casting a shadow on the other side because the light's hitting it. But it's also hitting the side of this one because it's out a bit. And then the other one is in more of a full shadow. So I like to understand what's happening here. And then we have a little bit of secondary and primary shadows here as well, because you've got the shadow of the two together, and then you've got the second shadow, the hard shadow of this pear onto the surface of the paper. I often too, I think it's always helpful when you're putting together your still lifes to have a clean sheet of paper so that you don't get, there's no complication with what's on the surface. So that's always really helpful too. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to block it. So what's really nice is I've already got my lines in here, and I'm just going to move around the form here and block this first pair here. Now when you're working with shadows and values, you really want to work around the form, okay? Because you want the value to actually help you understand what is happening with that form. I'm going to just like put this here. And then I am doing something that I didn't want you to do earlier, is I'm going to take away some of these lines here, because what's happening here is you've got the light hitting it. So I've got a little bit of ambient shadow here coming around the edge, which is kind of interesting. And then I've got a little bit coming in here as well, that's coming up around the form, okay? And then I also have some coming up this way. So you can actually work back and forth around the form. You can go upward, like up and down, or vertically or horizontally, okay? So you're moving up around the form. And then I'm just gonna kind of soften that line a little bit. And then up here, you see here on this, you've got like a very strong light. So one way to do that, to deal with that, is to just do a really light, very light gray tone all the way through. Okay. And then I'm going to look at this. I'm going to go a lot darker. I like to go lighter and then keep going darker until I'm happy with where I am in my shadows. Okay. And remember that your line, a dark line indicates a shadow, okay? So when you're using a dark line, think about why that dark line is there. Like this dark line here actually is part of a shadow that's being cast onto this pair. And then this one here indicates a darker shadow. So we want to always think about it moving around the form. And then I'm going to take my eraser, and it's become a tool, and I'm going to do some nice highlights here. Okay, and it's going to pick up some of the highlights, and you want it to be really, really soft here. So you don't want to have a hard line along the edge, because otherwise it will flatten it and it'll look like a cartoon. We don't want that. So if you've got a lot of light coming here, you're going to have very little edge here on this side, and then the other side is going to be, you know, a lot darker. Now this is where you might want to use your 6B. You know, we talked earlier about using the darker pencil. This is when you would be using it. I'm using, like I said, the 2B because I'm comfortable with going lighter and harder. So it's, and you can do that too if you're comfortable with it. And like I said, my drawings underneath are a lot darker because I want you to be able to see them. Okay, and then I'm going to just do the second one here. Now this one has more of like an overall tonality than the other one. I'm just going to smudge it here. I love smudging. And we're going to see that there's a shadow on here because this pair is in front. So I'm going to block that, and it's a little darker on that one side. And I'm going to do it a little darker. And so what's happening here, you see there's a dark line here. I can get rid of some of that, but there is a dark outline there. And if you look at the actual pear, there's very little outline because you don't want it to be like a cartoon, as I mentioned. You want it to be, very subtle, and so I indicated a little bit there, but we've got our shadows. Here. gray tone. So what I do, as I mentioned earlier, is I like to go light and then keep adding and more to it so that I get a gradation, and then I can go in really dark, and then I have no problem going in really, really dark in some sections that really need those dark shadows. And one way to actually do that and know where those shadows are is to squint. Squinting is great because like you'll see where those shadows are, and then it makes a better understanding. And again, like this one here, if I squint, I can see there's a really dark shadow underneath because it's holding it. And then there's a shadow under here. But then we've got the shadows here.